flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we're going to turn things over to Mrs. Sweeney to share some highlights along with hopefully some students to talk about their accomplishments with FBLA this year.
You press the white circle, it should advance your.
Okay. All right. So I'm okay. So I'm going to introduce a couple of next year's officers and members, and they're going to take it away and present our year FBLA 21-22. So up front is Caitlin DeTola. She is next year's FBLA president. This is Kaylin. He is a member, an honorary member. And Paolo is our parliamentarian, and Callum Brunel is our secretary next year. And so I'll do it. Where am I pointing this?
It should be right here. It should pick right up right on you. But it might not. Now, let me just move the mouse over there. There we go. Right now.
See if I go forward.
Yeah. There you go.
And now how do I go back this way?
You got it.
There we go, Katie.
Okay, so one big thing we focused on this year in FBLA Club was community service. So one thing we did was we teamed up with the Interact Club, which is a service club out of school, and we made blankets for the homeless. So we took fabric and made blankets out of them. We also did a walk for Rick, which is trash pickup. So a year or two ago now, a man named Rick saw our club picking up trash on the side of the road, and he thought that was a really great thing to do. Unfortunately, he passed away, so this year his wife decided to donate to the club in honor of his name, and so this year our trash pickup was in honor of him. And then we also made thank you cards for veterans.
So for inside the club, we did a number of culture and social activities. We had a homecoming hot cocoa day at the beginning, like the first morning of homecoming. We did like hot cocoa and available for everyone in school. We did an FBLA Spirit Day. We encouraged students to wear like the FBLA colors and just generally bring awareness to the club. We also did an FBLA breakfast. That was more recent. We like decided and voted and kind of appointed next year's officers and kind of had breakfast for all members. We had a Healthy Habits Bingo that was school-wide. It was kind of like a week-long bingo game where we encourage healthy habits, things like yoga, exercise, eating healthy, etc. We had a Buffalo Wild Wings lunch on our way back from the fall leadership workshop with everyone. We had a pizza in practice, which was we practiced for the spring leadership conference and had like a pizza party for everyone to get together. We had the Grease for Grades, which was like, again, another pizza party, but it was for the accounting class to kind of finish up all their final projects and wrap up the year.
All right, so for public relations activities, we had a teacher appreciation week where we express our gratitudes towards the teachers, all the hard work they've done for us. We have student appreciation, a weekend to recognize us. We have a thank you to veterans and first responders, to express our gratitude to them for serving our country. American Free Enterprise Week was a weekend where we learned about American Free Enterprise, and we would go downtown to see like the businesses and how and have them share their story and how they started. We have FBLA Week where it happened like in the month of February, and we just celebrated FBLA. This week we did healthy bingo habits, chair yoga, such like that, eating dark chocolate, all that good stuff. Cocoa for Cozy Day. So during winter carnival, we had a day called Cozy Day. Dress all cozy, in your pajamas. But we also serve cocoa too, and we have fall recruitment drive where to encourage more people to join FBLA.
That may have been me.
I had to make a slight little change here.
So some of the state projects that we did was the Supporting Small Businesses project, where we encourage students to shop from local communities from local stores after the COVID pandemic. And we collected receipts from that, and we tacked them all on a wall and made a big billboard of all the receipts that we got from around the community. And we also did the Healthy Hearts project, which was the healthy bingo challenge that we did. Part of it with the meditation and chair yoga and promoting healthy eating.
We participated in some national FBLA projects. First of all, 4 of our members got nominated for the National Leadership Conference, which means at the State Leadership Conference, they got 4th place or above in either a test or a project related to business. We also participated in the March of Dimes Prematurity Awareness Day, where basically members of the club wore purple to support the cause, and we also had a representative come speak to us about the organization. We had a ton of members of the club receive Business Achievement Awards, which is basically an award where you can complete activities and tests in 3 different categories of business. So we had a bunch of people get either 1 or even all 3 awards. The Summer Starter, Shaping Success, and CTE Celebration are all a part of this champion chapter booster. And basically what this is, they're broken off into different sections. So for example, the first one starts August 1st and goes to September 15th. And so from that time frame, we had certain activities or projects to work on, either within our club or in the community. So the ones that are in yellow were our goals. The ones that are checked off are the ones we completed. We were able to become silver champion chapter, and we were the only chapter in New Hampshire to win any of the awards for this. That was really great. And then we also had our current Vice President, Paulina Oakley, go to the National Presidents Forum, where presidents and vice presidents have an online meeting to learn about FBLA and how to better their club. It's great. Then we also had a ton of guest speakers. So the first guest speaker we had was a professor, Anselin Davies, who talked to the students. We also had a presentation on the Foundation for Economic Education, which was in the personal finance class. There's a guest speaker from the representative of March of Dimes. The Dockside florist owner came and talked to students about how she started her business. And alumni Mikhail Merrill, who was president 2 or 3 years ago, talked about his freshman year at college and what that was like. We also had a large majority of our club go to the Fall Leadership Workshop, which was a workshop both about business, but also focused a lot on team building. And then later on in the year, a bunch of us went to the State Leadership Convention, where we competed against different students across the state in business projects or tests.
Oh, sure.
All right, so this conference, we received a lot of rewards, such as the Gold Seal chapter, Honor chapter, largest local chapter, first place state officer project, Healthy Hearts, and achievement recognition for donating 50 blankets to the New Hampshire Coalition to End Homelessness. We also have winners, fourth place and above for this conference, with Harrison Hicks winning state champion personal finance, Hunter White winning second place in organizational leadership, myself winning fourth place in accounting, and Kate Totola winning fourth place in journalism.
Another award that was given out, or that is given out to FBLA members is the BAA, or Business Achievement Award. To do this, there's 3 categories. There's business ethics, business leadership, and general FBLA knowledge. And you complete like a series of tasks within each category, and then you take a test at the end. And if you pass all of it and complete it all, you are awarded with this. This is the list of all of our members who received this award this year, and it was the most in the state.
It's just some pictures of us at the state leadership conference. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
How many chapters are there in the state of New Hampshire?
I don't know, 30, 35, around that. There was around 3,000 people at the state leadership conference.
Wow, impressive.
Very impressive, yeah. With the members listed that won the awards, there's a lot of, how many members are there?
We had 63 members.
63.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's great. Awesome.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Please, all succeed. Yeah, you will make it. That's great.
Congratulations, thank you. Hello, Brittany. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Are you pursuing accounting, do you think?
Yeah, it's up there.
Are you thinking of journalism?
Economics.
Going through here, and we have Caitlin, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
How's it spelled?
Alan, okay, my apologies,
No problem.
congratulations. Aha, I think it's right that time. Congratulations.
Just telling you.
Sorry, I was gonna say we have travelers.
Yes, okay. Interlakes Middle High School's Bain Travelers Presentation.
Buenos dias.
Buenas noches.
Yes.
So during. Do you want to control that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Just once.
During our April vacation, we brought 14 students to Spain. 4 of them are here tonight, but 2 of them are presenting. So we also brought Kate and Callan as well. We had 10 girls and 4 boys. And with travel restrictions and everything, we were able to bring them all there and back without having anybody hung up in the system anywhere. So that was And Jesse and Ronan have put together a little slideshow, and they're going to present their experience to you.
Good afternoon. So the Spain class trip to Spain, we had a great summer break in Spain, and we visited some important Spanish monuments like the Alhambra in Granada, shown here, and some important cathedrals. Yeah.
These are just some pictures of the places that we visited. There's some like Roman ruins, and that's the cathedral in Cordova, which is actually a cathedral that's built in the center of a mosque. So that was really interesting.
Was the food good?
Very
Yes.
good.
No hesitation.
Did it seem different, the food?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it was a really great experience because it was much different than speaking Spanish in the classroom because, the people around you had more experience with Spanish. But it also ended up giving me a lot more confidence with it because I wasn't really sure if I was able to speak Spanish very well, but when I actually tried to ask people for directions, it ended up working out, and that really built my confidence.
So you didn't get lost.
Well, I did. I found my way eventually.
That's a good loss.
Yeah, and so yeah, it was really nice to see the different influences with architecture and food. Because I'm really interested in that sort of thing, like with the Roman ruins and the Arabic architecture, as well as the different influences of the food and stuff. And it was really nice because when going on the trip, we didn't really, some of us knew each other, we knew of each other, but we became a lot closer over the trip, and so that was a really nice group experience.
So,
No, do you guys have any questions about the trip?
I'm jealous.
Did you go to any flamenco dancers or
yes,
see any
went
music?
to one that was really
Is it-
interesting.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, it was.
Amazing.
What was the funniest encounter you had during your trip there?
Okay, so when I was asking people for directions, it took me 3 attempts because the first 2 people
Do you
that
want
I
to
asked.
back up and say why you were asking for directions?
Yes, so so what the Student Love Travel does, they try and get students to navigate, that way they can learn how to navigate in different places, and so they usually get us maps or stuff or things, and then people usually have Google Maps on their phones, but one day everybody's phone was dead and we didn't have a map, and so they said, all right, you guys have to ask for directions, so I figured I might as well try it. So the first 2 people that I asked were actually American tourists who did not speak Spanish. They did not know where I was trying to go. But I managed to find people who knew what was going on.
As you led 17 people through the streets of Seville.
Yeah.
People were relying on you.
In the dark.
Yeah,
And he came through.
he did, amazingly.
So is this spurred an interest in you or any of your other classmates to maybe travel to other places, or is it just kind of Spain focused?
I mean, I haven't been to any of the other places that we might go, but there's definitely a lot to offer in all the different Spanish-speaking countries, and I think it's a really great experience for students to go to a new country, especially if they're learning that language and they want to know about that culture.
Thank you.
Will this motivate you to keep going with Spanish and to, in
Yeah.
college and wherever, but
Yeah, no,
it's great.
heighten my interest in language.
Did you buy anything cool there?
Yeah, so we did okay, when there was some downtime we went shopping. Jesse and I both bought leather bags. I bought some pretty fancy looking pants. Unfortunately, they're not in this presentation.
You should have them.
No, did you buy anything really
I
interesting?
bought a cool envelope opener.
Or dagger. That you checked.
Yeah, it was all checked.
How was the paella?
Those were good.
Yeah, I found it pretty good.
Yeah.
Very big in size.
Meant for sharing, right?
Yeah, we didn't know that at first.
No, we had some good experiences with foods. A couple nights we do kind of a family style dinner where we all ordered something and we tried the different foods. We were able to get different experiences. So that was very nice.
How many days were you over? 9?
And what towns did you go
We went to Sevilla, then we went to Cordova. We stayed there for a day, then we went to Granada, and we went back to Sevilla.
And Senora Judge and Senora Langevin were
Yes.
the faculty
Yep.
advisors and had great courage to take everybody on this trip, which I think it's important to know, to take kids on a field trip is always, a significant amount of worry and planning, and to go overseas is even more so, and then add COVID. So I think they are to be commended for really wanting to give their students that experience and willing to take on the extra to do that.
But I always appreciate the school board too for supporting us in those endeavors all the time. I have been in districts that are not as supportive of experiences like this, so that's super important to us.
This is win-win.
It is.
So, did everybody pass the next test when they got back? Much better at-
Did you?
At the language?
Okay, good.
Okay.
Pass your next test.
Perfect.
Already have a
Any other questions? Did you have-
Well, I was just gonna ask, can we go the next time?
We should
Chaperone
organize
volunteers?
an adult trip to someplace, I think.
That'd be great.
You'll have no phone and have to find directions.
They have their phone, it's just
I
have
know,
my chart.
Howard, that will be a challenge.
That's happened.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. Nice job.
Thank you.
See that shit?
Next is public comments. I don't know if we have any. None? Any public comments at all? Okay, seeing no public comments. Interlake student representative update, Riley.
Hey guys, sorry I was a little late, I was at work and I was rushed to get here, but okay, so I have from ILSD 2 things. Just wanted to mention that the 6th grade field trip for both ILES and Sandwich students was a great success. I heard they had so much fun. I work with one of the chaperones that went and he said they had a blast, so I remember those fun. So, and then also there's a bunch more field trips for a few classes, including Lincoln Woods for 3rd grade, the Flume Gorge for 4th grade, and the Seacoast Science Center for 5th grade, and that's for ILES. And then in Sandwich, there's several classes taking a trip to the Squam Lake Science Center on this Thursday. And then I heard from Mr. Hilbert that a bunch of classes are focusing a lot on learning about New Hampshire history and their surrounding community, which is, I think, is a great thing. And then also the whole Sandwich Central School hosted an ice cream social last week, and I'm kind of jealous I wasn't there, but this was awesome. It's super fun.
It's quite good.
And I have a bunch of news from the middle high school. First of all, Dr. Downing would love to express her great appreciation for our generous donors in the community and the Interlake Scholarship Foundation for awarding students over $85,000 in scholarships for their future careers. So moving on, many athletes were honored last night at their spring sports award night. Many of our teams were extremely successful, most notably the boys baseball, varsity baseball, which I actually had a chance to go to that game. And it was kind of, the game was really fun to be at. I'm kind of upset that they lost, but still I think it's a great accomplishment for our teams to be out there. Something to remember forever, definitely. And now they are our Division III runner-up for the state. So, lastly, the seniors are gearing up for the end of their school year. Thought I'd mention this. Last Saturday, we actually had a senior night for all the seniors that wanted to participate. It was put on by the many parents from the after prom committee. And so we had a bunch of guest speakers, or well, 2 guest speakers and a few other speakers, including myself, that just spoke about memories that they had of the class. Guest speakers included Mrs. DeCamp from the elementary school, and then Mrs. Watt, which was my 8th grade social sciences teacher, which I really miss her. It was good to see her that night. Got her to sign my yearbook, which was pretty cool. And then also I wanted to mention the graduation this Saturday, June 18th at 10 o'clock in the high school parking lot. And I'd like to thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of this board. I really appreciate the experience. I'm pretty sure this is my last meeting. I don't know if graduation is gonna end that, but.
Typically it does.
Okay.
but-
I just wanted to make
You
sure.
are always
You're
welcome.
welcome.
Well, I actually wrote down here that I'm super excited to participate as a member of the community rather than a student next year. So thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity.
We appreciate all of your input.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have a little certificate for you, but we have a plaque coming, but.
The engraver is a little overwhelmed.
Okay, so this for you,
Thank
in
you.
appreciation of everything that you've done this year for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Been a great student.
And Riley, I will mention, being the shameless recruiter that I am, should you become that teacher, don't forget where you came from.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
And anything we can do along the journey.
So next up is the minutes for the special meeting, May 24th, attachment 1.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second by Duncan. Any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor of the minutes as presented?
Aye. Marilyn, I recuse myself.
Then we have a special meeting for June 1st, and that is attachment number 2. I have a motion,
So moved.
seconded by Howard. Any corrections there at all? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna recuse myself.
Okay. Current bills payable, attachment number 3, general operating expenses.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions with the manifest, which is 3025? All those in, oh,
One
go ahead,
question.
go ahead.
I'm trying to find the line item, but it referred to a tuition paid to Laconia. Would that be Hewitt? Usually Hewitt is identified as such. 61,000,
Yep, it says 2021 vocation.
oh, that's vocational tech, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Any other questions with the manifest? All those in favor of paying the bills?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, superintendent, assistant superintendent report, SAT, TSAT data presentation.
So Mrs. Papalardo, our curriculum coordinator, is going to share some SAT data and key SAT data with the school board and greater community. And just so the board, the SAT junior year is the state assessment test. So that was a change in 2016. So from 2016 on, our data is reflecting all juniors. Prior to that, it would be just students who did take the SAT. Not all students took it at that point. And so it's something for you to keep in mind that we are looking at the state assessment data when we're looking at grade 11.
Thank you. So thank you. I'm excited to be here to share our results with you all this evening. Many people have heard of the SAT. The College Board is actually a whole suite of assessments that we administer here in Interlakes. And so while the SAT is the assessment that we administer to juniors, we also administer the PSAT 10 and the PSAT 8-9. So the 10 is administered to sophomores and the 8-9 to our freshmen. And not only does New Hampshire use the SAT as their statewide assessment, but about half of the states in the nation do as well. And so this evening I am looking forward to digging into some of that data. But before we get to the data, I think it's important to just start and think about the students and the student experiences that our high school learners have had. Certainly has been unusual, very unique experience since they've joined us. So kind of going back, thinking about all three of those classes 3 years ago in the school year of 2019-2020, we were all fully in person up until the spring. And that spring was the spring that everybody switched to being fully remote instruction. So the freshmen were then 7th graders, sophomores 8th, and juniors 9th. That following school year was the year that we came back after COVID. And we came back to wanting to really mitigate the experiences for our community. And as a result, we made the decision to group our learners by pods. And so the experiences that our learners had instructionally that year varied from in-person to hybrid to remote, and there were a lot of flexible options. I should also note that for our juniors, when they were in 9th grade, that was actually the last school year that we had implemented our freshman academy, which afforded them year-long course experiences rather than quarter and trimester. So now bringing us to this current school year, we're now back in session. We are back to our block scheduling, and all students now 9th, 10th, and 11th grade are experiencing either quarter or semester long classes. The one exception to that are our freshmen who did have a full year of mathematics instruction this year. And as you recall, that was a decision that was supported in order to respond to some of the instructional gaps that we had started to note from COVID.
And that's ESSER funded. So
to further just help us navigate the presentation this evening, I've used the color blue to represent all of our Interlakes data, the color gray to reflect all of the state of New Hampshire data, and the color yellow is used to represent the total group data. And from the College Board, that represents all of the test takers in both United States, and there are also non-United States test takers. Additional term I'll be using this evening is benchmark. And the College Board uses this term to help us to calibrate with what it means to be college and career ready. And so the College Board has defined that students have met the benchmark. They are college and career ready if they meet a certain cut score in the 2 core areas of this assessment. One is math and one is evidence-based reading and writing. In order to be college and career ready, students must meet both of those benchmarks. And essentially that translates to being successful in a first semester college experience. So we'll dig into our SAT results now. These are our current juniors. Yes?
Do the students know what those benchmarks are? Do we ever tell them after they get their
We do.
scores back?
We do.
So they know then when they get the scores back where they stand.
And so this slide is just giving us an idea of just how many learners are actually taking this test this spring. So here at Interlakes, we had 52 juniors. In the state, we had 10,700 and just over 1 million in that total group category. So we can see there's a lot of learners taking this test this spring. Looking at our 63 juniors and breaking that down, we had 52 who completed the test and 11 who did not. And if you notice, I'm calling attention to the fact that 9 of our students have opted out. We've got 2 in special situations. That number 11 is kind of an important number. We've learned this school year that our Department of Education, for each student who does not have a completed score with us, will be receiving a score of 0. And so this is the first time that this will be implemented. And so as that rolls out, we will be learning more about how that impacts state reporting.
And so there's a disconnect between federal and state. So in the state of New Hampshire, we are required to provide the opt-out. We are legally required to do that, that families can opt out of the test, and we need to notify them of that option. The federal level has said it doesn't matter that somebody's opted out for accountability purposes, that will reflect a 0. What that looks like ultimately for us on some level of accountability, some of that stuff is all in process. But I do think it's important to realize that is a definite disconnect and not really one that we control. That we will have to see what that means, but what you're going to see are the results and the comparison of those that took the test and what they earned.
So we can see
So the
data
zero
without
is
that
not-
You
The
can't,
zero's not
we don't
included.
have,
It's not
we don't
included.
have
It's not
that
average.
information yet,
Yeah.
how those zeros will impact
Yeah.
us. And I think it's important to say, it's not that those students earned a 0, it will just
Yeah.
count as a 0. And I wanna make sure families who opted out don't think that that's being recorded next to their child's name. It's just an accountability calculation that we don't have yet.
Will they give you data then on region or school as far as the percentage of the opt-outs throughout the
I'm not
United
sure
States?
at this
To
stage.
understand what that would be.
But the 0
We'll have to
will
wait and see.
affect the, will affect the schools,
It will affect
the
the
way the school
school's
is
level of
represented in the
accountability.
results.
I always thought we got 400 points on the SAT if you got our name
I think they used to say 200.
I don't want me.
That's economy. It's going up. Yeah.
Erica, what are the special situations?
So a special situation might represent a student who's in a different learning environment and has an opportunity to complete the test in that learning environment. And sometimes we receive those scores. Sometimes those alternative environments don't provide certain assessment options. So I think without disclosing any additional information, I think that's the
I
best
think these are
answer.
fairly small numbers. I think it's important not to.
Thank you. And so this slide is showing us essentially our students as they break down our current juniors in terms of how they've performed in each of the primary benchmarks. So that first purple bar is showing us that 50% of our juniors have met the College Board's definition of college and career ready. They have met both of the benchmarks in both math as well as evidence-based reading and writing. 63% of our juniors met the evidence-based reading and writing benchmark, and 56% met the math benchmark, and 16 of our juniors did not meet either of the benchmarks. And so this is just our district data, and we always make a practice of comparing what's happening here locally against the state, and then also we have the total group to compare against. So that's what we're seeing here. So while 50% sounds fairly alarming, as half of the juniors who were tested met that benchmark, as we compare our performance to the state average, we can see that the state is currently at 35%, and then the total group, when we jump to that category, it dips all the way down to 27%. And as we just kind of visually look across, we can see that we're kind of similarly performing in the way that we are. Remember, the last category, it's actually a positive that we are lower than the others because we have fewer students who are not meeting either benchmark. So this slide then just kind of takes that information and presents it a little bit differently. So looking at mean scores, we can see that total mean score again at Interlakes here. Our mean score for the total mean score is 1,047, and coming in just slightly above the state at 1,006, and the total group at 957. And we are also outperforming both the state and total group averages in the evidence-based reading and writing mean score. And we've got some celebrating to do with that math achievement there.
Yes.
So we can see that we're outstanding against both the state and the total group. So one of the additional things that the College Board provides us with is an additional breakdown of information. So rather than just getting this mean score, we also have the ability to see a little bit more detail in what we call sub-scores, or just different kinds of areas of the content areas. So evidence-based reading and writing is broken down into 6 different kind of sub-scores or different categories or skills. And when we look at this data, it's pretty interesting to see how the breakdown spans. We can see that we've got quite a few students who are falling into that approaching benchmark category in some of these skill areas. So instructionally, when we think about just what much additional those learners would need to get into that next group of meeting or exceeding, we've got a number of learners there who are right on that cusp, ready to make that leap into that next category. And then I've used the color gray just to visually represent areas in which, those are the favorable areas. So you can see our data on the top row compared to the state performance on the bottom row. And fairly much across the board, we have outperformed in each of the subcategories on this assessment as well. In the math section of this assessment, there are 4 different categories. And visually here, you can see how here at Interlakes, each of those 4 subscores, we have outperformed the state performance across the board. So that is, again, something to celebrate this year. Because we've been administering this assessment for quite some time, we actually have a 9-year historical view of what this has looked like over time. So here we're looking at that view from 2014 to this spring, and we're looking at the evidence-based reading and writing mean scores. Our Interlakes mean scores compared against the state average mean scores. So with 3 exceptions, we have consistently outperformed the state with those mean scores. There are 2 bars that your attention is likely called to, the first being the one that shows the point at which in our history of administering this assessment, it started to become our statewide assessment. So that's 2016. And then the other bar just is kind of another outlier. It's a little bit of an anomaly in our history because that was the school year that our juniors did not complete this assessment in the spring because we were fully remote. When those students came back to their senior year, they completed the SAT in the fall, and our juniors that year also completed the SAT in the spring. So it was just a little bit of an unusual year for us. Looking at our 9-year historical progress.
So, excuse me, Eric.
Yes.
So does that mean those seniors in the fall of 2020, is that the number for the 2019 score?
2020.
2020.
The spring of 2020.
Instead of March 2020, it was fall 2020.
Thank you.
Yes.
Got it. I'm catching up.
It's super confusing.
If you factored in summer slide, that's actually makes it better.
For
However,
sure.
And they were coming off of spring of
Right.
20 being
Yeah.
remote,
Right.
ending their year
So
remote. So
It was spring slide.
we actually, our lowest score was spring 2021. And so that was last spring, when we had, people were potted, we had the hybrid model. And so, that may be a factor why that score is such an anomaly.
Absolutely. So this next slide then shows us the same historical view, but focusing on the mathematics section. And similar to the evidence-based reading and writing, our data over that 9-year history has outperformed the state average with just 2 exceptions. So again, some celebrations here. So shifting into the PSAT, it's a very similar assessment to the SAT, just has a few differences.
I'm sorry, can I
Yes.
ask questions on the SAT then?
Absolutely.
The SAT. So, a bunch of slides ago, we had data on the benchmarks to the whole state. Are we able to pull data to specific schools? And how we match up to different schools as a basis, right?
Yes, the Department of Education has all of that information available on a website, and we're able to scroll through that and peruse that. Did you have something to add to that, Mrs. Gates?
As far as comparing to other schools. There is a tool, iAnalyze, on the state that does allow you to compare one school to another.
Okay. So do we do that? I just asked because a couple of years ago we had, question about the USA Today, high school rankings, right? And how we ranked and how the rules had all changed. Are we using this data too to take a look at how we rank against?
We try to see how we're doing compared to, our colleagues in the
Yeah.
area, and is something, that they're doing, gaining what
Yeah.
seems to be a bigger result, or something that we're doing, so we try to have a sense of that, and Erica certainly is connected with the curriculum instruction assessment group for the Lakes region, so that becomes part of the conversation.
Okay, so we have some of that data that we've analyzed, or we will analyze it?
We will analyze, this is new data,
Okay.
so this is still the beginning stages of that.
Okay, and then another question about this data versus our students that actually go on to higher education, right? And how our data matches up, where 50% are okay, and we're the one chart, 71% are closer, so whatever that was. And what that success rate is for those students. Do we analyze that at all?
So it's hard to collect
Sure.
the post year. It is something we should work on, trying to get a survey. Some places utilize survey companies to try to get results from graduates, how they did.
Is there a way when these students choose to go to higher education, and we know they're on the cusp, right, that we make sure before they even get there, there's student labs at college, et cetera, that they should be contacting and using, and make sure they know, and doing the professor office hours and all that kind of stuff, so we can entice them to really succeed, right?
So
And make sure
talking
they're prepared
about the
that way.
experience, I don't know if
Yeah, so the counselors meet with each senior family individually each fall.
Okay.
And go through a plethora of information, an actual booklet that we put together. And we go through from the application process to senior year to staying strong. But we go through all different pieces. The SAT since COVID has become somewhat less marketed, I guess, for the schools. Some of them dropped it during COVID, some have returned to an optional status. So the SAT's in a funny limbo, I think, right now for a lot of colleges. But your competitive schools still
Right.
want strong scores for sure.
But I think to your question, are we helping kids
Yeah, I mean,
realize
when
what
we're
they have
doing
access?
those interviews, do we say, this was your score, and this is, from data, this is where you're at. So this is where we think you need to express more interest when you get to college to make sure you succeed, right?
Right,
So
and we
tell
actually do
them
that with the PSAT 11 in the
Yeah.
fall, before they even take the SAT. And we say, this is how you could improve for your SAT in the spring, because they take
Right.
the PSAT 11 in the fall of junior year. So we actually try to help them work towards
Yeah.
improving in the spring.
And we
as
have
well.
To the test.
a course we want to talk about that I think could incorporate what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about that, but I think that would be a good piece to include, and that comes a little later.
Yeah, I just think this is good information for each student to have and to know, I mean, how much
Yeah.
more help do I need once I get there, right?
Yeah.
And writing
Because it's not a
clinics and
cakewalk,
things like,
and
Right.
we need to make sure they know.
and there is a lot of support often on campus, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, each college offers different, yes.
All right, thank you, sorry to
Absolutely.
take that much time.
So we'll transition to the PSAT 10 results. Again, these are our current sophomores. And one of the first things you'll notice here as we look at this distribution of how many learners take this test is there are significantly fewer learners taking this test than there are the SAT. Again, the SAT is a commonly used statewide assessment in our nation. Just because the school district opts to embed that assessment, they don't necessarily have to also embed these other tests. What these, the advantage of having these also embedded is that we're able to start looking at student performance much earlier. And so we're not waiting until that junior year to say, oh my gosh, now we've got an issue, and what are we gonna do about this? We've got some really strong assessment practices that allow us to be actionable as soon as we start to look at those scores, beginning freshman year, really. So this next slide shows us how our current 77 sophomores break down in terms of who completed the test and the number of learners who did not. So that roughly works out to about 82% of our students completed this assessment. So when we look at the data for this class, we're just remembering that it doesn't represent the 100% of our current sophomores.
And this is not required as part of the accountability system, so the opt-outs here don't have the same level of influence on, you know, potential.
What was the final statistic for SATs? It was about the same, wasn't it? For how many, what was the percentage of people who took it as opposed to opting out?
62 students.
Oh, 62,
52
yes,
took it.
yes, 11,
Okay.
yes. Mhm, mhm. And then I guess the other difference here with the PSAT suite is that when students are absent, we don't generally reschedule
Right.
makeup, whereas the SAT, because it is our statewide assessment, we do. So this slide is showing us our breakdown in terms of those learners who did complete this test, which are the benchmarks they were able to meet. And so 38% of our current sophomores have met both benchmarks. And very similar to the NWEA assessment, the PSAT is also a very predictive assessment. So we can start to look at this score and say, it's fairly likely that if we don't start to intervene and do something differently to help these learners, it's likely that this is going to be the score that will repeat when they do eventually complete the SAT. 65% of our sophomores have met the benchmark in evidence-based reading and writing, 46% in math, and we have 17 of those sophomores who completed this assessment who have met neither of those benchmarks. Again, we'll look at our data and we'll compare that to our state averages. So while 38% again feels like an alarming percentage, when we compare that to where the state and total groups are falling at 36 and 35% respectively, it kind of puts us almost at par with that performance. We're falling slightly below in evidence-based reading and writing, significantly higher in math, and we're right where we want to be. We want to be lower than the state average and the total group in terms of students not meeting those benchmarks. So the next slide shows us similar information, but we're looking again at the mean scores on those tests. So the total mean score here at Interlakes for our sophomores is 913, again falling below the state, but on level with the total group. And we can see that our evidence-based reading and writing is falling under and our math over. The next group that we'll look at this evening is the results from the PSAT 8-9. These are our current freshmen. And you're going to notice another significant drop in the number of learners who are completing this test. So here at Interlakes, we had 67, just over 2,000 in the state, and almost 38,000 in the total group.
Erica, was this both 2 grades or just?
Just the ninth graders. It's
Just the
called the
ninth.
PSAT 8-9, but just the ninth graders take this.
We use NWEA with our 8th graders.
So here's a breakdown in terms of those 73 freshmen this year. We have 67 who completed the test and 6 who did not.
Again, not part of the accountability system.
And here we have a lot to celebrate as we look at how that their performance breaks down in terms of the benchmarks they've met. We can see that 58% of our freshmen have met both benchmarks. 85% have met the benchmark for evidence-based reading and writing, 61 in math, and just 8 learners have met none. So that is pretty phenomenal data to celebrate.
Yeah.
Visually, as we look at what that looks like against the state averages and the total group, it's very similar to almost what our juniors have done, right? So lots to celebrate here with our performance with our current freshmen. And as we look at our mean scores, again, compared to the state and the total groups, still much to celebrate here as well. So very proud of
it would seem, and I would defer to my numbers partner over here, Mr. Billings, but the difference here seems much more significant than the others. Is that accurate?
You are correct.
So what is so special about this group?
It's a good question. I think it's one that we are currently analyzing right now. I will say the focus of our analysis has been on our sophomores because we're more concerned with what we're seeing there. But I think your question is great and one that we'll dig into. But our focus is really on the sophomores right now. I'm sorry.
I just, you mentioned sort of in passing that the PSATs are predictive of, can you elaborate on that? And do you anticipate seeing these kinds of numbers when they matriculate through to take the SATs? And do the past numbers demonstrate that?
So those are all great questions. I haven't yet been able to look into the historical part of the answer to your question, but I certainly will, and I'll bring that response back to the board.
Something to keep in mind, again, small numbers are very sensitive, and
Sure.
we've had the students who we don't have scores for.
Yeah.
When
Will
if
be,
they were to
sure.
test in the
Right,
future,
of course.
that could go in many different directions.
Or one direction.
We also do a lot of work with triangulating the data.
Sure.
So not only do we just look at these scores, but also for the freshmen, they've got a host of NWEA
Sure.
scores from the fall and winter and spring in math and ELA as well as science.
And we couldn't compare those at this stage because they're end of course courses, and so those are just being completed at this stage.
We have some makeups that are still lingering, so that the testing window hasn't yet closed for that assessment.
Erica, getting back to the accountability. Tell me if I'm wrong. It seems to me that this might penalize communities in relationship to their general socioeconomic status. And I would be very concerned about that if that turns out to be the case.
I think, the accountability piece is in motion. I'm not sure what that's all going to look like, but I do think the opt-out, potentially that has this, the possibility. I know there was at some point some communities that had very large numbers that were doing opt-outs. And if that's going to be zeros, what that might ultimately do, for their, accountability relative to the state assessment. So I think that's in motion. I don't think we have enough information yet. We're just sharing with you what we know might be problematic at this point, just so that you have an awareness of that. As we know more, we'll share, but it's complicated.
As it was presented, it creates a very significant concern for me. The other point I think I would make is test scores are helpful, but they're simply correlational and not causal. There are many factors involved in whether or not a student has a successful first year, second year, third year in college. Many, many factors. This is just one. And I don't think we should lose sight of that. It's not that it's unimportant, because any information is important, but let's keep it in perspective.
Balance is a good thing.
Absolutely.
So you have.
So, we always say that we don't ever assess learners unless we're going to do something with the information, right? So we take that responsibility extremely seriously and are so grateful for the board's support of all the ideas that we always bring forward to say, we've got some data, we've looked at it, we're concerned about it, and here's what we're going to do about it. So that's really kind of where we're transitioning to here. So we saw this slide earlier, our current sophomores and how their performance kind of puts them into those categories of the benchmarks that they've met. And while this slide is really helpful to see, we can break that down a little bit further. And again, I know this is just 82% of the current class, But as we break that down, we can see that those 24 learners have met both of the benchmarks in order to be on track to be college and career ready. And then we've got 39 other learners that we're pretty concerned about. So we've started to have conversations about, what can we do? And those conversations really started with the English department over the winter. They started to make observations in working with students, primarily specifically about their ability to attend to writing responses. And they invited Dr. Downing and I to have a discussion with them about their observations. And that meeting sparked kind of an investigation into some additional data. So in addition to the SAT scores, at that point we didn't actually have SAT scores yet. We started to pull some of our historical data. We started to look at their performance in their current English courses, and we started to talk about what can we do because we're concerned. And so we've talked about doing some things that are more embedded in the full school experience, questions of the day, embedding some additional time during their office hours, which is a time that they all have in their school schedule that would provide a common equitable access for some review lessons. And then also running some boot camps over the summer or hosting some targeted sessions for students, because again, we are able to also drill down into those skill levels to see, well, if they're not meeting the benchmark, what are the areas that they need the most support with? And so that conversation has continued to develop over time, and it's turned into this idea of adding a course to next school year's experience. So it would be an SAT preparation course, and the idea would be that there would be 2 sections of it running, each for 1 quarter, to be co-taught by a math and an English teacher to be able to support those learners, again, targeting the 39 who fall into that group. And of the ones whose data is not reflected here, we have done some additional analysis to pull in some of their historical records. And we've also reached out to the classroom teachers to request them to share some comments and observations about whether they believe a support such as this would be beneficial to those learners who we have less data on. So I think Dr. Downing and Mrs. Beaton are going to speak to that in a little bit more detail later on, but if you have any questions about the data.
I have a question about the name of the class, because it implies that the SAT is the end goal, and it's really college and career readiness. It's evidence-based reading and writing and success in math, and so that's just my question, because there's so many SAT prep classes out there.
It's a great
and
suggestion.
to say we're going to offer one too, how does that compare with, the one I can spend $1,000 on anyway? It's just
we had the
an
same
observation.
conversation.
I'm sure you did.
And we went back and forth on it actually, and the first idea proposed was college and career readiness. So I think that is in the works. I don't know that it's been determined, but I think we landed on, for now, putting a pin on SAT prep.
Yeah, it just requires a lot of explanation to parents and kids that, this is why we're doing this.
Yes.
I think it's worth noting, I believe it was Mrs. Carney and Mrs. Nyhan who ran, volunteered to
Yes.
do SAT prep after school on their own. They wanted to do that, and so.
Mr. Heyman too.
And I think that's worth acknowledging. So thank you to the 3 of them.
Yes. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the enrollment information. Mrs. Moriarty.
No significant changes.
Next
One.
is
Just one.
financial report. Mrs. Tanzalino.
Thank you. The financial position, available fund balance increased by $316,000 since May report. So we are at an adjusted available $1,545,000, just about. We're still
On income, you said?
available fund balance.
Available fund.
So we are still working to refine that as we come towards the end of the school year. It will take a few more weeks to get that really hard number, but we feel pretty confident that that will be somewhere where we want.
What are the rules on pushing it out now? We can push it.
We have on the next agenda item.
Thank you.
End of year encumbrances.
Fund balance.
So you have, Ms. Temporino is distributing 3 versions of possibilities for you to consider. Our hope this evening is to present some options to the board for your consideration. And we thought that having a meeting next week after you've had time to consider those options would make sense for you then to have an opportunity to come forward as a whole board and then vote what we would like to do with the fund balance at that time. So the first one looks to retain 50% of the maximum allowed. If you look at the bottom of the page, this is an RSA governs how much you are allowed to retain. And retaining allows you to move it to the following year. So it would be moving towards the 23-24 school year, or to that financial year to offset the amount to be raised by local taxes. So the full amount would be $681,000 plus dollars. One of the things that Ms. Temporino, I think, does a great job of explaining is want to be cautious of creating peaks and valleys and trying to kind of keep things fairly stable, so that you're not having spikes that really put taxpayers, I think, in a very challenging situation of knowing what to expect. We are proposing some encumbrances that the board may want to consider. Our middle wing stairs over by the south entrance of the middle high school, they have decided to disintegrate at a faster rate than we had hoped. They really, to the point that we have just shut them down as emergency egress only. It's definitely something that, whether we have fund balance or not, we're going to have to find a way to address it. Safety, we are looking to do some additional safety upgrades. The state is putting $10 million towards safety. They'll be offering grants over the next couple of weeks. It will require a 20% match. If you recall, we've done that in the past. So this could help to support a 20% match, whether or not we would be awarded. It certainly would provide the opportunity to pursue some additional support for safety work on our facilities, which is always ongoing. We're never done with safety improvements. The next is Growing Roots Counseling Services. Why is that proposed here and not through ESSER funds? The reality is that we have a group that we would like to work with. We've had positive experiences this year. As you start to get to larger contracts, the federal government would say that you should really be going up to bid and trying to get comparable bids, and then trying to select somebody from a bid proposal group. We are confident they can meet what they've said, and it doesn't feel good to us to try to go out to bid for competition that maybe somebody's going to come in at a lower rate, but maybe ultimately not be able to perform the service. I don't think this is an expense that's going to go away. I think the reality, and quite frankly, I'll tie it to safety. I think I think being able to provide licensed mental health to individuals is part of our safety plan. The other piece of that is this would be affording 2.5 days that we are able to meet the needs of students who are not able to have their insurance coverage. Another 2.5 days, they would be billing, they would be for individuals who are able to access personal private insurance. Third run for the UIT, we are fortunate to have students who, enough students that we are falling into a third run or a third scheduling option so students can access the UIT. So typically we've only had students accessing the two parts of the schedule. We have enough interest that we have seats open to us to be able to provide students the option at the third block. And it's a relatively, I realize it's an extra bus run and it's $22,500, which I do agree is a lot of money, but relatively inexpensive to be able to have students access potentially. If you want to talk about college career readiness, it's definitely an opportunity for them to access education that will hopefully aspire future learning. Technology during the budget process. If you recall, we did cut the technology department by $20,000, and we said our hope would be that there would be fund balance that we could ask the board to consider. So our goal would be to make them whole for the expenses to support technology next year. Athletics infrastructure, $225,000. So there are areas of athletics that we need to create some equity. One area, well, the area that we need to create equity is the girls' locker room. It is dramatically different than the boys' locker room, which was upgraded, I don't know how many years ago.
12 years ago, I think it was.
And our goal had been to do the girls now a few years back, but the boiler in Sandwich decided to go unexpectedly, and we shifted funds to do that. And then our plan had hoped to, try to do something, and COVID, and so it has been put off. And it really does need to be addressed.
It's way overdue.
It's way overdue, and so we would like to use those funds to also bring in an architect for current space we have. The reality is the current locker room for the girls, there's also what I would call is a physical education office, there's some storage. We need someone to create a vision for how the space can best be used. Our goal would also be create a team room within that, so a locker room and a team room, which would create parity with the girls. With the boys' side, which the team room was meant to be shared, but the reality is you have to go through the boys' locker room to get to the team room. So I think we can do more if we have somebody with a the ability to look at the space, and also the athletic trainer space. The athletic trainer plays a huge role for us. And I have to say, I'm always amazed at how much we get for that contracted services versus how much we pay for that contracted service. We have an obligation to make sure that the athletes are being cared for so that they don't have lifelong injuries. And Izzy Ford, who's the athletic trainer, really takes that very seriously. Concussions, we know more about concussions today than they did many moons ago, and so we need a place to be able to do treatment. And we basically have them in kind of a closet. It's not a closet, but it's a pretty challenging space. And so I think it's looking at the spaces we have and can they be better utilized. And so our goal would be to use some for an architect because we can't design build on our own. And then the rest to do that renovation. And then if there were additional funds, is that something that could be considered to start saving to do lights on the field? The reality, lights on the field, 6 years ago were probably about $250,000. Today they're approaching closer to $450,000. So it's becoming, that's just getting further away. If there was money that then, was after doing those renovations, possibly to begin some kind of savings towards that. That might also help people to do some fundraising and not feel like they're starting from zero to get to 450. The other thing not included here, the board did encumber last year, was about $110,000 for the for additional seating. We can, I believe, use some ESSER funds. We've not, we were kind of seeing where things were at. But that is a step that we could take to try to do that, which I think, again, our seating is really, there's very limited to no seating. And they have not held up well what we have. When you go to a place that has stadium type seating for their athletics, it encourages people to come and attend. We have a lot of people that have been very willing to sit on the hill and bring blankets, and we're good old Yankees about it, but I think it is time to really create more of a formal environment for seating. That could also then, why we would use ESSER funds, we could use ESSER funds because it provides us an outdoor space to be able to do things if there was another virus that we needed to, again, be prioritizing outdoor time. So those are the things that we're thinking, and that's why they are proposed. We have prioritized them on this list, so you'll see, so that's version 1. That's with retaining 50%. Version 2 is retaining 75%, so that's carrying forward 10,000. And then there is version 3, which is all 100% that you are allowed to retain. You'll notice then that makes the encumbrances go down. So we have prioritized the middle wing stairs. Again, they are a safety hazard for us right now. No matter what, we have to do that. Safety, the Growing Roots Counseling, the third run for the UIT, and technology. And if something had to go on that last version, it would be the athletics.
So what would the $80,000 version of athletics cover?
I'm not sure, maybe the architect?
Oh, gee.
Did we, I thought in the budget for next year, we have some fees for architect for the.
That did not, that was not something that made it forward in the budget process. We had talked about potentially some outside space. And this is not for outside, this is for current space we have. So that did not take any traction.
What hasn't been mentioned and has to be understood is that we have a capital improvement program with a discipline on it, regardless of where the underlying funds come from. Obviously, where there are restrictions, time and use, that factors in. But ESSER money is no different than us carving out $500,000 from our budget for those kind of capital investments. Anything over $100,000 falls into that category. And it is the solution to preventing the peaks and valleys. And it's tricky right now because of all of the government money that is being put to work out there, some somewhat questionable purpose, but not all. I was wondering, if these stairs have been grading as fast as they have, I don't believe we've ever had that on the CIP.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we have.
We pushed it.
It was
We
one of
pushed
the
it.
things that got pushed out.
And one of the things that I think will be part of this solution is an overhang
Right.
to protect it from weather. And that was part of what we,
Before too. Yeah,
we-
we talked about that.
we have tried to push it to try to create.
I'll have to go check my CIP books, I've got them all.
Be my guest.
You know?
And it has really, they just, I don't know what, is it concrete, Brian? That it's just, it is really, it's crumbling.
Yeah.
It degraded much quickly over this past winter. It was one of those projects that we've been trying to get going, and when you have competing interests or you're trying to get the budget process through, you look at what's the most important, and you keep shuffling things, as we all know. So it's one of those things that we just shuffled too many times.
I think it's important to remember the lesson of the outdoor lighting. Because the longer we wait, the more all of these items are going to cost.
$1 today in facilities does not go as far as $1 in a year.
And it compounds.
It's great.
It compounds, and that's critical. 10% this year, 10% next year.
So we are gonna be discussing that.
Yes, so that we just wanted to present those ideas. I don't know if the board has any questions on how retaining works or anything. We would turn that
No,
over
we
to
can
the
send you
master.
questions, right?
No, we
Have
can
them
send
answered.
questions.
Can we send you questions?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, staffing update.
So we are, this evening, we have 2 nominations to bring forward to you. We have, after that, we have a physical education teacher at the middle high that is open. That will be through a resignation tonight that you're going to act on. We have a .4 physical education teacher at Sandwich open, although that's in process. My hope is that next week I'm bringing you a nomination for that position. We have a speech language pathologist. I'm out onto television, speech language pathologist. That is an opening. That is a hard position to fill. So that is one that we are concerned about being able to fill. And if we are not able to do that by a certain point, we will look to have to contract a service, which is not our ideal, but we do need to make sure we're able to meet those services come fall. We also have a 1-year special education teacher position, and that is one that we've not had any applicants at this stage. So it's really the 1-year speech. The speech and language is not a 1-year position, but the 1-year special education. Those 2 positions are really concerning at this point. I do feel we'll be able to move forward with the physical education openings that we have.
You said .4 on the speech pathologist?
No, .4 for the physical education in Sandwich. It is a full-time position for speech language pathologists.
Obviously, if you're looking at contracting versus hiring.
Right.
Okay. Update, school student problem identification and resolution of issues together, the school spirit program, Mrs. Moriarty and Dr. Downing.
So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Downing, who's done a great job. Her tenacity about the spirit program has been remarkable.
So we had our first established Spirit Council meeting on June 6th, and right now we have 18 members of the council, which are the students that from the initial meeting have really dedicated themselves to working on the problems that the Department of Justice helped us decide as a school were really our areas of focus. I'm currently still waiting from the Department of Justice, David Michael or Michael David, he goes by either, which is strange. He is pushing the best he can to get the report to me in an expedited fashion. There's a lot of red tape and a lot of things that have to happen to get that on our table. It does have to be vetted by a large group of people. That report will essentially outline all of the concerns that came forward from our community meeting, where we had our community partners come in and facilitate the meeting with our students, where they identified what they thought were the concerns. We came back together as a group and voted, and I'm hoping to have that report in my hands pretty soon. He believes I should have it by the end of June. We just actually elected 2 co-facilitators for the student group, and we're going to have Hannah Coleman and I'm gonna space it. And Sumner Mills as our student co-facilitators for the group, and Colleen Forcal is going to serve as our faculty co-advisor. So her and I will work closely with this group to kind of continue on the path of improvement. The plan is to have 1 more council meeting before the end of the school year to kind of look at the report, go through some of kind of spitball some ideas for how we want to open up in the fall to continue drumming up interest in the group. We had an inclusivity day today at the middle high school, and Spirit had a table there. And at that table, we we were able to sign up, I wanna say over a dozen additional volunteers that wanna be involved at the beginning of the next school year. And that's kind of where we are with that process, so.
Is there any data on the number of participants to the success of the program?
So the way that the Department of Justice has it laid out on their website is that you can look at I don't think that they actually use identifying information of schools that are enrolled in the program for some privacy pieces, but they do the website has some great inspirational videos about some of the work that they've done at schools, really more focusing on the adults kind of reporting out about what it is.
Right.
But I mean, all I can speak to is the fact that my interactions with Michael, his tenacity in helping us make this happen, as well as the horsepower that he brings to the table with the resources has been pretty phenomenal. But without stepping on the toes of the students and the adults in the building that really have to do the heavy lifting with this, which I appreciate. I think the kids appreciate it, and they came in with the attitude of not necessarily wanting to take over, but just trying to help us facilitate how to make those changes. So.
Dr. Downing, would you say that this program is one that will grow in the coming years? Do you feel like it? I mean, do you get a vibe any way or the other, or is it?
I think that my honest answer to that is the program will grow as long as we continue to make it a priority. And I think that that's on the building leaders and the staff that are involved with the program to continue pushing forward and having the students help us facilitate these solutions, because I'll already, it's easy for me to see when we're in the groups how much more they listen to one another than they do at the command of any adult. So I think as long as we continue to give them the time, and most importantly, give them that time during the school day, that's something that I promised to the council that I think has to be a priority, is that what I'd like to do is do one meeting per month and rotate that through either the A, the B, the C, or the D block, so that we can always have that group together, and it won't compete with athletics, and it won't compete with other outside clubs, because then I think what will happen is the interest will fizzle, and then of course the interest in the program will decrease. So I think if we want to get the most bang for our buck, if you will, we'll prioritize having those meetings during the school day, and also just involving as many students that want to be a part of it. Given any particular activity that we might put on, it will be an important part moving forward. So we had a lot of interest today at the Spirit table. That much I know. Summer and Hannah both ran that today and talked to a lot of students who are interested. And they had a little bit of a bird's eye view of what problems were identified during the meeting. So they discussed a couple of those with the students, even though that hasn't necessarily been publicized yet. So
It strikes me that program helps teach our kids resilience.
Mm-hmm, that's part of it.
That is a growing important skill set for any young person, anybody actually these days.
To be honest, I think that's my favorite part of it, is the fact that it recognizes that conflict happens and that these are issues that our schools face, that our communities face, not just our community, every community. Yeah. It's the attention that you put into it and the time that you put into it to come up with the solutions, and also teach our students how to deal with this conflict and to deal with it gracefully, because ignoring it or using really deep punitive measures, as we've seen, doesn't have a deep impact. But these conversations with kids and the honesty that came to a lot of these meetings, and these students' ability to be vulnerable about some topics that were really ugly, was really impressive. So, and the adults that were involved were just as impressed with the student dialogue that occurred. So it's been a great process so far, and I think that the 17 kids that we have, unfortunately 2 out of that group are moving away next year, but they're a dedicated group of students, many of them that are going to be here for several years, that I think could really affect some change.
Thank you.
You were talking about wondering how you were going to get 60 kids to do the training. I'm just interested in how that worked out. And
yeah, so we did that. Best laid plans. We had originally over 60 students that volunteered to come that day. We wound up with just over 20 for the actual community day.
Oh, wow.
But from that group of 20, 17 of them are now on the council. which is the established council, which will follow through. And we, like I said, we had an additional, since that happened, I want to say that there were 5 students that couldn't participate that day that have since rejoined. So we're not, it's really going to be, I think, fluid when it comes to numbers, and students will join as the activities that we put out pertain to them and feed their needs. So it will ebb and flow. I think in hindsight, time-wise, having it maybe during the school day instead of on a Saturday might have gleaned some better participation, but again, with it being put together and taking another school day away from the teachers and students was difficult, so we landed on that Saturday. But I think that the volunteer numbers are going to continue to increase as long as we market it well.
And I'll take responsibility. I encourage the Saturday because we've just been very stressed with not having enough substitutes and trying not to further tax the building. It made sense.
Okay, Interlake's Middle High School Master Schedule Course Proposal. And that's 2022-2023, Dr. Downey.
And we are skipping ahead.
I was gonna say, what happened to A and B?
We're trying to see if we can provide a little relief by moving that up the agenda. So that is attachment 6. So just so the board recalls that classes that are 10 or under, they come forward for your permission to run. The reality is we have a staffing. The reality is the timeline of being able to really make those decisions in January or February is difficult. And really we need to be looking historically if there are concerns relative to being able to sustain in certain areas. We've broken it into the various subject areas so that you have a sense of where we are seeing some changes. And certainly I don't want to speak for Dr. Downing or Mrs. Beaton. I just have some historical knowledge that typically this is brought to the board for your permission, which is what is being done this evening. And I don't know if you want to highlight anything or.
Yeah, well, in here, we do have some new course proposals that are going to come along with a new hire that we have coming in the fall with fundamentals of electricity, power, and energy, kind of reworking that position within the STEAM department, which was before this traditionally like woods and wood shop, whereas we're seeing where the student interest piece is gravitating. So using bringing this person in who has some CTE experience and creating these new classes in conjunction with that instructor. And also the SAT prep or college and career readiness class is a new course. The reason that it has TBD is because we're still actually populating that class, writing the course description, and working on the competencies that we're going to attach to that class. And that came, again, as Mary referred to earlier, that came from the meeting that we had with some English teachers about some concerns that they had with prep levels of particular groups of students. And advanced language studies is another class that we're working on now. Again, TBD because we're still working on creating the course description, and that's going to be something that we're going to offer within the language department.
And that may be an advanced placement language course, which we don't offer at this stage.
I think another area to note is the merge of the Honors English 11 and Honors English 12 with the advanced placement. In a response to looking at those numbers of trends over years, we didn't want to lose those courses, but the English department came up with a really great idea. So the AP English 11 and 12 will still run as a full year course, but the first semester will merge with the Honors English 11 and then Honors English 12 students. So a great way to still offer the honors and the AP, but also be very mindful of numbers. So you can see the number of students looks strong, semester S1, semester 1, and then when you move to semester 2, that brings us to the AP numbers. So semester 2 honors AP English 11, 3 students, semester 2 AP English 12, 5 students. Okay, but they're in that count of 16 and 17 is all from first semester. So I think that's an important change that is occurring this fall.
The other thing to consider, we do have 3 electives under music, electronic music, guitar, ukulele. Dr. Downing and I met yesterday with our band instructor, and one of the things we are looking at is trying to provide some opportunities for greater connections with sixth grade, which is critical to the transition to 7-12 band and chorus. And so looking to maybe not run 2 of those quarter electives to provide more opportunity for that instructor to go work directly with sixth grade. We do need to put a little effort into revitalizing the COVID experience did have an impact, and we're trying to give a little opportunity to do a little refreshing and reviving, and making those connections is really, I think, an important piece of that, as well as we have a new band teacher at the elementary level, and so that connection, I think, is a helpful one for the 7-12 band and the elementary band teacher to make.
Couple of questions, if I may. And I'm sure it's because the asterisk is up there on the Spanish 1A, you're having one class with 13 and one class with 3.
Yes.
Why not one class, or why not
Yeah.
average out the size?
Sure, so we are doing the one class for the French 1A, but the Spanish 1A, there are going to be 8th grade students adding in second semester for Spanish 1A and French 1A. The 8th grade students have the option of taking a high school language class at the end of their 8th grade year. So we had enough, we can't predict that number quite yet, and those numbers don't come in until late fall. So sometimes that can be 15 students signing up, sometimes that can be more or less. So we just thought balancing those 2 together, that would warrant 2 classes.
And follow up under the fundamentals of electricity and power and energy new. I understand it's a different kind of classroom setup for these exercises, so are you really capped at 6 or 7 such that you have to run double blocks of both of those courses?
So these are brand new courses that the students, didn't know about with our new hire, with our new STEAM teacher. So they didn't have an opportunity to sign up originally in January. So now students will get their schedules this week, and we'll meet with them, and I think these will become popular. But so he's running them in 2 consecutive quarters to allow for more students to be able to take it and to take something opposite.
So it's not simultaneous, it's 2 separate quarters.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if
Thank
you
you.
recall, that was a late hire
That's
that
right.
for this coming year.
I don't remember the conversation about a new STEAM teacher.
So this is the redesigned industrial arts, or.
Right, last year we
So,
thought about automotive.
Mr. Weddick was hired, I think it was probably January, February, but it is for next year. He wasn't hired for this year. So this year we added extra arts to provide more hands-on for students because we were not able to fill that industrial arts position. This is fluid. The reality is schedules still will change.
Yes.
The other piece that just so the board is aware, so family and consumer science. So we had a resignation, if you recall, for family and consumer science / health. So the health was partnered with the part PE teacher we have to make a full PE health teacher, which will help support our health requirements that we need to meet for students. For the family and consumer science, we are actually using micro assignments for our language teachers. So they will be picking up, 2 of the language teachers will be picking up, I believe it is a health, which will be foods or nutrition, and a 7th and 1 7th grade family and consumer science class. So we will be providing them some additional training, but rather than hiring a 410 family and consumer science teacher, we are looking to absorb that within existing staff. So that will be something for this coming year that we're going to, everybody's willing to do a little learning and a little opportunity, and because it is a small assignment and we can provide some training and some prior type of coursework, we are allowed to do that.
So I so all of these classes that are on here, you've got staffing for right now.
Correct, that's correct.
So I'm pleased to hear, that teachers who may not have enough to fill their schedule or jumping in to do other things, that's great. And that you've got another solution maybe for the music. You know, I know it's a prejudice, but, and I was a musician and all the way through school, but it seems much more logical to offer small classes in, you know, Spanish 4-5 than in ukulele. So I was pleased to hear that. So that's good to know. I think the other question that I had was just an anomaly on this. You've got one student in intermediate algebra in 6 sections. That has to be a typo.
Oh, did I flipped it.
Yes,
That's a typo.
That's correct.
That just seemed odd.
And
that is my error.
All of our eyes and nothing.
Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Madam Chair, I'm just wondering if a record of board support for this memorandum, even though it is fluid, would be in any way helpful.
So it would be helpful if the board would make a motion to support as presented with the opportunity for us to make like those amendments to electronic music, ukulele and so forth.
Madam Chair, so moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Did you get the name?
Yeah, I heard the name. But it wasn't unanimous. Who's running that down there?
No.
Correspondence, superintendent, board secretary,
Not a thing.
board members. Okay, old business, sports injury emergency action plan. Mrs. Moriarty and Mr. May.
So you had last month, we presented the plan. The maps have been updated. And Marilyn, these are copies of the updated maps, is that right? I understand. We didn't want to make you a whole new
No,
set
no, that's
when it was only a slight change. So
Thank you.
this is the change to the map. And again, this is a requirement that we have this plan.
Only if it's accurate, does it pass now?
So we're looking to get a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Your ambulance locations are fine.
It was hard over the phone, but I'm glad I understood you correctly.
New business, Interlake suicide prevention plan, Ms. Moriarty.
I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Eaton. This is a requirement that we have this plan. And it's something that has to be approved. I believe it's every other year. For us, it is better if it's every year so that we're staying on track.
I think it's very similar to the first plan that we approved. I'd just like to call attention to attachment number 5, because there's a new statewide program to really help alleviate the burden that the emergency rooms have been feeling these last several years, and it's called New Hampshire Rapid Response. And in July, a new type of 911 number will be implemented for the state, but it's 988.
Right.
So families can call that number, any citizen can call that number and get immediate assistance. They could get an appointment right there on the phone, they could get a virtual appointment on the phone, they could get an appointment for tomorrow, and they even could get a mobile unit coming out to meet them, possibly someplace neutral, like a police station, a school, and eventually possibly to their house. So it's quite a response, I think, that the state has brought together, and our medical center supports Lakes Region Mental Health, and they do have a mobile unit that they're getting up and running. So we haven't used it yet at the middle high school, but we know we have it. But we have in the past sent students to the emergency room who need to be seen immediately. So this is a wonderful program. So we're really excited to pass that along to families. So if we're meeting with a family that are in a difficult situation, and they have immediate resources. So just wanted to call attention to that resource page, and that new program that's in New Hampshire. But as far as the plan itself, we're required to have the plan, and we're required to train our school community, our staff, custodians, bus drivers, like volunteers. So we did quite the extensive training last summer and fall. Lisa Ransom and I is a 2-hour training that's required each year. So the administrative team has talked about alternating an online training one year, in-person training the next. It's a heavy training. But we did a lot of them last year to try and get everybody, coaches, custodians, cafeteria workers, everybody in our community. We really tried to have multiple trainings so people could attend. So there's a lot of work, and of course the students as well. There's suicide prevention resources and trainings. We've had students who have been trained who go into health classes with Lisa Ransom. So we've had a parent night this year virtually. It wasn't super well attended, but so we try to like hit all our facets. But a lot of work around suicide prevention in our school district and in our state, of course, as well.
So I'm looking for a motion to approve the Interlake School District Suicide Prevention Kit.
Can I ask Mrs. Stevens a question?
Well, why don't we,
Well, yeah, do whatever.
let's do the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, Mike.
One, I was struck by what I call the APs, for lack of a better bucket to put them in, weren't included on this, and was wondering why. And I guess I'm dumb, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 counselors. I'm not saying that's too many or too few. I'd just like to know what that school counselor is doing during the day.
So they do a substantial amount. So we have at Interlakes Elementary, there are 2 guidance counselors, or school counselors. At the middle high school, we have 3 school counselors. And at Sandwich, we have for next year, it will be a 0.5 school counselor. And then we have an outreach counselor who think kind of like as a social worker that is pre-K through 12. So that's really being able to help, assist families with challenges that are interfering with their children's ability to access their education. And that can be, helping people to find ways to have heat in the winter. So that has a myriad of needs that are met. So school counseling ranges from assisting with state assessment tests to administering that, to course selection, to working with, when we have students who are struggling, working with teachers and families to try to help those students be able to be successful with their learning. And that can take, maybe those are behavior issues that are coming up and they're helping to support behavior plans for when a student is indicating a concern relative to their own safety, that school counselor plays a significant role in trying to assess and figure out what next steps are. The suicide training, so that has really fallen into our school counseling and outreach counselor to be able to provide that training in-house. It's a lot. It's significant.
Yeah, I think it falls into several buckets, from academic.
I was gonna say, it is a big bucket.
College career planning, to social emotional, to kind of the pieces that work within the school function, right? The testing and the AP exams, 504 coordination, we're all 504 case managers, the master schedule. So we have some big projects, and then we have a lot of triage, throughout the day. And then we have scheduled times that we want to meet with students to sit down and pick classes, look at their schedules, plan for their college admissions process. So we have lots of different individual pieces, group pieces, and big projects.
And teaching.
And we
teaching.
go into the classroom for social emotional lessons in grades 7, 8, and 9.
And that would be Choose Love, that we
choose love consistently. So
which is part of our safety prevention program. And in terms of, are you referring, Mr. Billings, to the flow chart and the?
Attachment 5.
Okay.
Who's looking at that?
Okay, so I think the reality is that an assistant principal or a dean may come into contact that a student is presenting with concerning behavior that needs to be evaluated. And so they're going to turn that concern over to the people who are most skilled in our buildings to help to do that, which are the school counselors, school psychologists, who will then take it from that point on.
Thank you.
Their job is to spot, to be aware of concerns,
Well,
and
you-
make sure, and that's the responsibility of every
I
adult,
was gonna say,
which is why the training exists.
yeah, you've spoken to us before. Could be another student making the administrators aware.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And thank you to Mrs. Beaton for her continued work on this, and to the whole guidance department for the work.
And I'm sorry, I missed this, but I just was thinking, I listened to a report last night from 2 professors, I think it was University of Minnesota or something. They've written a book, they've done this project called the Violence Project. And over the last, I think, 9 years, they have studied individuals who perpetrate mass shootings. And their findings were that many of those individuals had attempted suicide or demonstrated suicidal ideation, and that all of the and that they often tell other people that they're planning to do these things. And one of their conclusions was that if we treated those behaviors the same way we treat suicide, and we use the same techniques, not negative disciplinary responses to behaviors, but the kind of supports we put in place for suicide prevention, that could be a really important way to respond to, because these are often high school age people. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that because the plan that you've got is excellent. And and I know that it's hard to distinguish those other kinds of behaviors, threatening behaviors or acting out or violent behaviors, but they appear to be more connected.
So we do have a threat assessment process that we go through. So if a student was to say, I'm gonna kill you, there's a process to go through to see if that is a low-risk behavior or a high-risk behavior.
You described that in December for us, I
Yes,
think,
and
yeah.
so it is based on Dr. Dewey Cornell's work, who was originally associated with the University of Virginia. Has been doing it since the early 2000s. His organization will be coming to train our administrators and our school counselors on it again this August. So that is also part of our safety process. And so we have been trained in the past, and it's something, again, that we have to continuously keep ourselves current, as well as we have some new staff members. The other part that I think is really significant is they will consult with us on, like, if we are going through an assessment and we want to engage with them about here's what we saw, here's the conclusion we came to, are you coming to a similar conclusion, can you give us feedback? They include that as part of their commitment to us, not an additional charge. And so a big piece of that is not getting to, here's the consequence, it's okay, so now someone is demonstrating a level of risk, what are we going to do about that? And that's where the growing roots, having that licensed mental health easily accessible is a key part. And we have had great success with them being able to provide us with providers that we've been able to make those connections when we've needed to, that I think are showing some gains, and having access is critically important, where a lot of families can't get access, and the wait times are excruciatingly long. So,
Right, moving along here, data security and governance policy, Mrs. Moriarty. And
we're going to turn things over to Mr. Parsons. This again is a legal requirement for us to have a data security and governance policy. And it is something that annually the school board needs to approve. It's a great thing for us to have. As you know, data security in all of our lives is pretty significant.
You're very welcome. All right, good evening. I'm happy to be here to present my learning that I've undertaken in the last 11 months here, which has been quite vast, and data governance is a very important topic. In an effort to keep this brief, because I would go drone on forever, I made a 2.5-minute video which sort of highlights the overview. It sort of supplements the document that I just gave you. And it kind of frames things. For folks at home, I'm going to mute the microphone that we currently have in the room, because I think the audio should play through the television. If it does not, I can send you the video separately, because I'm sure you'll find it spectacular. This video is meant to provide a brief overview of our Interlakes School District Data Governance Plan. The plan originated in response to House Bill 1612 and is now part of the New Hampshire RSA Section 18966. This requires a data governance plan that is approved by the school board, is updated annually by the board. Changes to the plan from last year were mainly contact information edits as we transition to a new director of technology. We will review the 5 main requirements of the data governance plan. Part A requires an inventory of all software applications, digital tools, and extensions that are used throughout the district. To help accomplish this requirement, Interlakes is a member of the School Data Privacy Consortium, referred to as SPDC, which provides a public-facing list which is linked on our website. Part B requires that all digital tools meet New Hampshire's strict data privacy requirements. Interlakes, in partnership with the New Hampshire Chief Technical Officers Council, uses the Education Cooperative to acquire New Hampshire's strict data privacy agreements for our electronic resources. And then this is sent to and posted to SPDC. Part C requires procedures for access to data and the protection of privacy for students and staff. We have procedures in place to request new resources, and this is an area that we can better train our staff, and we can also work to refine the process so it's more efficient to request tools. These procedures are accessible from our data privacy website. Part D is the majority of our plan, and it contains many appendices for the responses to a breach of information. We address Part E through our data governance team. our data governance falls into two main categories, academic and administrative, and the plan outlines caretakers of each area. In closing, I just want to thank you for your time and for making data privacy a priority. That's the feedback loop we were trying to avoid.
At least you proved, sure.
Prove that it would work. I noticed an error. I cannot get these acronyms straight. It's Student Data Privacy Consortium, SDPC, and I transposed the P and the D a couple of times. That is something that at the outset of this, back in 2018, 2019, we didn't really have in place, so there wasn't a real streamlined way to keep track of all of the different resources that we are sharing some data with. So that has been hugely helpful. We are with them in partnership with something that is through the New Hampshire CTO, the Chief Technical Officers, that organization. And we use the TEC, the Education Cooperative. And they're the ones that are the lawyers behind the scene that vet data or privacy agreements from each of the vendors. So if a staff member saw a new tool online that they wanted to use with their students, everything looks fun and exciting, but we need to make sure that they don't target advertise to students, that they don't, or that they have specific processes in place to protect any data that they collect. And that data could be username that is considered for students, personal private information. So we cannot share that without a very specific disclosure. We're lucky in New Hampshire. We have a really strict data privacy agreement procedure and really requirements statewide compared to other states, which sort of forced us to do this years ago, and other states are catching up. But that was just an overview. I didn't go through the details contained within the document that were shared electronically with you folks, but happy to answer any questions.
If you have
if you have them.
specific questions, that may need to be in non-public just to assure that we're not violating the security of our plan.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Except for the reverb.
Yeah, sorry. I should have known that.
Just some more water. Does anybody?
EPA Clean Bus Program.
Can be real quick with this one.
Okay.
We are eligible to apply for a grant to purchase some electric school buses. Eligible doesn't mean we'll get it. I believe it was 10 million or 10 billion. I've got an M and a B in my head that the federal government has given to the EPA to try to do some.
Can't be a million.
It's gotta be a billion. And million wasn't sitting right with me, but billion seems like a lot of money, but they are expensive electric school buses. The reality is, the way that it would work is we are eligible, so not everybody in the state is eligible for this first pass. We are falling into that bucket. We would apply if it was received. The actual buses would be owned by First Student because they're their buses. But we are the entity that has to apply. They can't apply directly.
This
So we
request
would
is
be.
coming through for student to us.
Yes. So, it may be 5 buses we apply for to start with, something along that line, to dip our toe into it. There definitely are some concerns about length and, it is a different type of vehicle. So we probably don't want to change the whole fleet over all at once.
No.
And I know First Students said they were concerned about like longer trips like to Boston or something like that. So certainly maintaining our current diesel, part of our fleet would be important too. So just stay tuned for more about that.
Were these full-size buses?
Yeah, it'd be a full
Okay,
size.
so the 14-person electric van theoretically isn't in the.
Correct. This would be a school bus, a big school bus.
Standard school bus.
And it would include, I believe, changing over, so for fueling or charging,
Charging.
for them to be able to have that ability. probably at the terminal, at the.
That would not be our problem,
No,
it
no,
would
no.
be
It would
first
be
student's
theirs.
problem,
Correct,
which is great.
correct.
So is most of the work being done by per student? We just have
So-
to ask go for it? So
Yes.
This is not a bandwidth problem in your office.
No.
right? You don't-
No, well, we're gonna write the grant, but.
I don't, it doesn't, it's
Right.
not it's not a difficult grant to apply.
One of the advantages, I think, of having vehicles or having batteries that move and do other things is that you can buy and sell power at different times. And I know that that's something that fleet management is using with electric companies, and presumably whatever advantage that would do would accrue to first student and not to us. Which is, I mean, that's something that is an advantage that we would not be seeing.
Right, right, but we might see it in a savings in terms of our contract with them, if they were able to charge at a time that is lower. I don't know,
There's the numbers guy, I'm going.
It's more of an opportunity, because for us to be able to afford it at some point to change over without support, it's just
Sure.
economical.
These have to be $300,000 to $500,000
They are.
vehicles.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, they're all of that.
All of that,
They're
because the
north.
standard was what, 200?
The one we looked at, Mark, the 14 was over 3,
Right,
plus another 56 for the charging station,
right,
Yeah, the charging stations.
so.
or something like that.
Okay.
Plug 'em
World,
into the
The
sewer.
other is more,
Well, yeah.
we wouldn't ask you to approve this evening. It's, there is another trip that is being proposed to Paris. And if you so, feel that it is something worth, considering, we would put it on next week's agenda. So it's an opportunity for you to have some thinking. There's significant backup about what.
Stay in Paris and not travel around?
No, they go to.
They have an itinerary.
it's just like the Spanish.
Yeah.
So, tonight you saw the value of the
Yeah,
trust.
that's great.
And after long await, we do have the Greater Meredith
Yes,
program
the
here.
Greater Meredith Program and donation to a landscape project at ILM and ILHS.
Mr. Swunker.
Yes, good evening. Before you, just have a proposal for hoping you approve a partnership with the Greater Meredith Program, who approached us with the idea that they'd like to utilize their beautification project that they have elsewhere in town to kind of make Interlake's sort of the gateway when heading west. We'd be the first commercial property kind of that could be included in the program. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but the idea is that, they would like to keep beautifying Meredith and have produced an offer of 50%, and all the work and labor is being put together by Ms. Nagers here, but I'll turn it over and she can give you a little more info.
Hi, I'm Janine Neggers, for those of you who don't know me. Both of my children went through Interlake, so all you're talking, I can relate to everything you're saying. So I'm on the design committee, which is a subsection of the Greater Meredith Program. And because I get to say it because they said I could, I'm the youngest member. And since my children are the more recent graduates, they decided to have me approach you, because, I would like to give back as well, because, both my children were very successful here. And this was an opportunity for me to give back, and we wanted to help you, because I know it's been years, having been here all these years, that we wanted to do things, and there's always budget issues. And so they said, Janine, we're willing to pay half of the cost for the plants and the shrubs. So we have a design landscaper on our committee who came up, and I believe you have the picture. So this was her drawing, just to get us started, to see how you felt about that. Because we know that Officer True had concerns about safety, because as a teacher, I know we've been using outside areas a lot more during COVID, and we've continued because it's fabulous. So he had that concern, so he was talking boulders. And while we understand boulders, it wasn't really gonna make things look beautiful. So we started with this, with the understanding if you wanted to later add boulders as that barrier for him, it could blend in nicely. So of course, the biggest cost we know is labor. So I called a friend and he approached his boss. They're the new owners of Dolbier Landscaping in Moultonborough. And I said, hey, can you see, is there any interest? They jumped on fully with the project. They will be donating all labor, all the equipment for it, for us. And they will work with Brian and myself, and we're hoping to have it done in July or August. So then our landscape designer called Milliken. We got a reduced rate down there, so the pricing of the plants, because we work with them on plenty of beautification. So we're willing to pay half price for the plants and shrubs. We have submitted a letter, I believe it's addressed to you, Lisa, as the chairperson, that kind of outlines it, because Milliken does COD. So we would take on the full cost, and then we will give you that invoice to show that it's paid in full, so that we can essentially bill you, I guess, and you can pay your half. Our concern was we didn't want it upfront because some of the shrubs could be rejected by our designer if they come damaged. So we didn't want to go with the original invoice amount. So that's our proposal, because we'd like to start partnering with you at your different schools and the areas, because you are a major piece coming into the town. And my other project that we've got Dolbier on, I don't know if you've seen in front of the chamber. We're in the process of beautifying that area. That has been in process for 3 years prior to COVID. And they jumped on board with that one as well for us. So you'll see that being done in a little while, because it's kind of not attractive right there. And you see it coming right into Meredith. So we're asking if you're willing to partnership with us on this, with future possibilities around the sign. And we thought this would be a nice way for us to get started. And we're gonna put a sign up for Dolbier, just to let people know that, they are the ones. If you're okay with that, it would just be a small sign, that the landscaping was being done by them.
The front sign is being worked on. Mr. Swanker is working on some design pieces. So our goal, the board did encumber money last year to replace the front sign, which is looking pretty tired and is a major focal point. So that is something that is underway, and hopefully, I'm not sure how we're doing with the timeline at this stage, but I do want you to know it's in the works.
Yeah, it's in design with pocket signs now for some.
And the other
options.
piece so the concern from a safety standpoint, one of them is that if a car was to go off the road, the reality is.
Up there, that's possible.
It's a highway,
Okay.
right? There's a highway. We are utilizing more outdoor space. So one of the things Mr. Swanker is working on is a wooden type of guardrail, for lack of a.
We definitely want to an actual timber style guardrail for that instead of boulders and such. And then if we can partner with this landscaping, I think it'll help soften the other side of that, but that timber rail would provide the really, the protection that we're looking for, and still aesthetically not look,
Please.
quite as highway.
Yeah.
Does R2D2 come with the plants?
I think that's supposed to be a sign, not to scale.
I know, as she said, not to scale. She was out in the middle of the winter. But doing this, yeah.
Just a little.
This is very generous, and I was gonna ask for a motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Swanker. Has there been any study of the soil to make sure that the plants that are placed can thrive in that environment?
No, I did not study that from soil.
Soil test, that's easy to get.
I can answer that. I give that answer, yes. We haven't done a soil sample, but according to our landscape designer, because of the trees and plants that are already flourishing there, we do not anticipate a problem, but if they dig it up and realize it, they're going to bring composting in by Dolbier to mix before they put the plants in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Any other questions?
Do we have our half of the money somewhere?
We will use the facilities to meet that.
Okay, and then I guess, Mr. Swiper, as far as maintenance program, now there's gonna be more trees, et cetera, does that change our contract with who does the lawn mowing and all that? Because it's gonna be more obstacles, more time?
It shouldn't. I think we're gonna try to produce maybe a raised planting on those so that they just become easier to mow around actually than creating trim time and such.
Right.
And I think also paired with this, we're gonna try to do some removals of the over mature trees that are out front that would also help increase the speed and ease of maintenance out front.
This group understands over mature.
Yeah.
Some better than others, Mark.
And we, the GMP design committee, can help with the pruning because we do that in other areas of the town if that becomes a problem.
Oh, wow.
Right. Okay. So I think, final layout of plantings will kind of be done when we all get together on site. But the ultimate plan would be to have that delineation of guardrail just out of the state right away so that we can even kind of sort of delineate where nothing can happen in the future.
Yeah.
Do some soft plantings provided, and then I'd like to connect the sidewalk again that has disintegrated and gone away from there so that, people can safely pass or connect to town again as well. Because the sidewalk comes to us now and it's where the sidewalk ends. So.
And we've started some conversations that I think are a little premature to share about sidewalks and other possible infrastructure type improvements. That
First, I think it could be utilized just as an on-campus item, but it may tie into some larger.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And we thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for your patience.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, donations, attachments 9 through 11.
So there are 2 donations this evening, just making an adjustment on the agenda. One donation, because it's proposed to carry over for another school year, needs to be returned because of bylaws. So we are bringing forward this evening $500 from Bella Woods Building and Remodeling for future Interlakes Middle High School after prom activities, and $250 from the town of Center Harbor for the Interlakes Middle High School band and chorus activities.
Motion to accept the donations as presented.
Second.
I guess, and Mark.
Sure. Good gratitude.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Gratitude. Resignations, Ms. Moriarty.
So you have 2 resignations in your packet. You are welcome to accept that in public, or you may choose to have discussion in non-public.
We need a discussion in
On the
non-public.
resignations?
Yeah.
So,
Okay, motion to release from the 2022-2023 contract and accept resignations as presented. Motion.
so moved.
Second, anyone?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Having a little learning challenge.
No worries.
Nomination of professional teaching staff for the 2022-2023 school year.
We have 2 nominations to bring forward tonight. Certainly, I can present them to you, but if you have specific questions and would like to do that in non-public, it's up to you how you'd like to.
You start, we'll decide.
So, Marilyn, we have materials. So we have a nomination for a business education teacher and a nomination for a special education teacher for the PALS program. So the teacher at the PALS program this year is moving to take a vacancy at the middle high school. So we had a switch of staff, and so that created an opening. And so the individual that is proposed to you this evening is Sue Buskett, who has worked with us since a paraeducator, and she worked towards getting her degree. She filled a 1-year leave of absence this year for us, and she has applied for the PALS program, and Mr. Bryant and Mrs. Dodge are enthusiastic about her candidacy, and so certainly her nomination is brought forward tonight, as well as a second nomination this evening for business education teacher. We have Mrs. Sweeney, as you saw this evening, with the FBLA. Recall she has resigned to take another position. And so bringing forward Whitney Sullivan this evening for your consideration, who is absolutely enthusiastic. So if there are any specifics about each of those individuals, that would be in non-public.
We have the motion? Or not yet?
Not yet. A motion to approve the nominations as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Is there any need to go into non-public?
I don't think so.
Okay, I don't
No,
think so.
I'm excited about new business.
Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, policy review committee. Minutes, May 24th, attachment 12.
And that's just for your information. There's no action on the
action.
minutes.
Second reading and adoption. Moriarty, that's 13 through 18. Do you want to read the policy?
So that policy, student activities fund management, travel and reimbursement policy, student fundraising activities, emergency plan for sports-related injuries, and additional protocols for athletics participation. You approved that plan this evening. Home education, character and citizenship, and this is a second reading.
Okay. Is there a motion? Is there a second? All those, is there any questions at all? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
a related comment, if I could.
Sure.
We have on the attached policy samples, both our numeric designation and what I believe is a New Hampshire School Boards Association designation.
Correct.
And the advantage of the School Boards Association's designation is obvious. You can compare districts, the association members themselves can research much more quickly. But I think we should, on our next agenda, include an explanation of the alphabetical designation.
Okay. Moving along to rescind, attachment 19.
So as we've done policy work, things have folded into other policies and we're trying to eliminate duplication.
So motion to rescind policy 5135.
Motion to rescind. Second.
I'm gonna say Craig this time.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye. Hurt feelings.
I know. Okay, additional business, members of the board. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be very careful when I say this. I think as a board member, I would be very comfortable recommending that students who go on foreign trips, for example, the trip we have before us tonight, I think it would be appropriate for the board to recommend that all the students who go be vaccinated for COVID. Not a requirement, just a recommendation. And I realize it's edgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Okay. Okay, members of the administration.
Not the same.
No. Public input, our second public input. Is there any public input?
Is there any public?
I don't think so.
Seeing none? Nope.
Okay. Announcements, Saturday, June 18th, Interlakes Middle High School graduation ceremony. Yay, 10 a.m.
What time did we arrive?
Well, we should get there a little early, like 9:30.
It's gonna be a little busy, so
It'll be
maybe a little
busy.
earlier.
Just wondering.
And that
9:45, the latest, I'd say.
That will be at 1 Laker Lane, Tuesday, the 21st, Interlake School Board at the Hummiston Building, conference room. Policy review will be at 5:30, and special school board meeting at 6 p.m. Tuesday, August 9th, Interlake School Board at the Hummiston Building. Policy review will be at 5:30, and regular school board meeting will be at 6 p.m. Tuesday, August 23rd, Interlake School Board at Hummiston Building. Policy review will be at 5:30, and regular school board meeting at 6 p.m.
And here's summer.
There
I
you
was gonna
go.
say, thank you for the 1 month vacation
Yes.
this year.
I have a motion to go into non-public session, RSA 91A 3B, C, and I, the hiring of any person as a public employee in matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of this board, unless such person requests an open meeting, consideration of matters relating to the preparation for and carrying out of emergency functions, including training to carry out such functions developed by the local or state safety officials that are directly intended to thwart a deliberate act that is intended to result in widespread or severe damage to property, injury, or loss of life. No, I can't. Okay,
So moved. Second?
okay, and Duncan. Okay, may you hold the
Mr.
board?
Porter Zuckerman,
Yes.
Ms. Thurman,
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham,
Yes.
Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Billings.
Yes.
Ms. Merrill,
Yes.
I also vote yes.
Okay.
Thank you for serving on the board.
Thank you.